You're about to listen to a segment from our weekly podcast where we check out gaming news and rumors, among other related topics. Tune in live on our Twitch on Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern. Links are in the description below.
So, alright, so now that we've introduced all our stuff, I guess we'll get into our podcast, and we'll start about our first topic, which I think is a pretty hot topic. And it's loot crates, DLC packages, and then most recently, Metal Gear Survivor.
Oh my freaking god, Metal Gear Survivor. That shit pisses me off so bad. So, just to start off, to give an introduction of what the game is, it's basically an offshoot after Konami got rid of the lead developer, Hideo Kojima. He was an absolute genius and just created all these crazy, amazing Metal Gear games, and everything he's ever touched has basically turned to gold. But the thing that pisses me off about Metal Gear Survivor is that despite it being a $40 game that's really just like a zombie game where you just run around mindlessly doing dumb bullshit, the worst part about it is that at the end of the day, they still want to get more money out of you regardless of how it works. Even though you paid $40 for that fucking video game, they still want to get more money out of you. In the worst form, the worst thing I've ever seen in any video game is whenever they have made it so that you have to get you have to pay microtransactions so that you can have extra save files. Now, that's just so much bullshit, because at the end of the day, nobody has ever gone to that length to just say fuck you to their consumer base than a company that has said, hey, you want extra save files? Let's put it behind a paywall. And the worst part about that fucking paywall is that they do it with in-game credits. They don't even do it with, like, you swipe your card to get this thing. You have to pay credits, and those credits are more. You have to buy more credits, which comes up to, like, I think it's like $10, $15 for the credit pack, and then you end up, and that's how you get the extra save files. So they are literally taking something that has been just a constant in video games for pretty much ever, and they're turning it into a microtransaction that you have to pay in order to be able to take advantage of having extra save files. That is complete bullshit and is a complete insult to the average consumer, so fuck those guys. That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely ridiculous, because imagine if you were playing an RPG, Skyrim, or, you know, the best game from that developer, Fallout New Vegas. Imagine if you wanted to start over and you wanted a different build. I'm sick and tired of, I don't know, the swordsman build, and I just want to play, I don't know, something else, and you're paying $10 for another save point, and that's just absolutely ridiculous. I'm totally not on board with that. I think next they're going to start charging you every time you save. It'll be like $1 per save, and you just can't turn off your console.
I mean, so to be fair, and I'm going to play a little bit of a devil's advocate in this, to be fair, do you think that companies shouldn't capitalize off of something if they know people will pay for it?
I think that there's an honest way to do it, and then there's a fucking asshole way to do it. And I think they chose the fucking asshole way to do it, because the honest way of doing it is whenever, like, even Bethesda had some issues with the modding community and coming out with paid mods and all that stuff, and don't get me wrong, I'm not a big fan of that either. But at least there was value that was being brought there. At least there was something that was being brought to the table. But in this case, all they're doing is making it so that there's a basic function of this game, and they're being like, nah, how about that $10? That would be great.
Yeah, my biggest problem that I've seen in the last few years was I was a huge fan of the Mass Effect series. I absolutely loved it. They worked so hard in building a game with like this compelling narrative and just making it like wonderful and beautiful and enriching my life with this story. I was excited to play it. I stayed with it for the first two games, and then the third game I absolutely loved it until the very end. And then the very end they dropped the ball because they wanted people to pay for DLC to have an ending. And that was the very first time that I realized that like video game companies have kind of lost a grasp on what your average consumer wants, and that's a complete game. And they're more concerned with getting whatever they can. And I'm not sure who's spearheading this. Do you think it might be EA?
I mean, EA's like the problem child of the entire industry, but like at least Mass Effect did it in a reasonable way in regards to they came out with the Citadel DLC, where I'm pretty sure the Citadel DLC was free if I remember correctly, and like basically that was nothing but fan service and like concluded a little bit of the story. But they also came out with the patch that made it so that there was a little bit more different of endings and a little more fleshed out than just like red, green, or blue. Which do you choose? Which color do you prefer?
Oh my god.
all of these decisions that you have made have now come to a point of red, green, or blue that you make at that point. So that like they at least answered their fans in a reasonable way. All that the company that's making, I can't remember the name of the company anymore, but all that they're doing in this instance of Metal Gear Survive is just being like, hey, we understand this is a dying series. The main guy who did everything is no longer with us. So let's extract as much money out of our fans as possible. Let's get every dollar that we can while we still have this IP and it's still a current thing.
What do you think?
Is this a reason? Like, is this part of the problem though? Is that a lot of people don't know that Hideo Kojima is no longer with Konami, and that they're taking advantage of having the IP Metal Gear Solid, and that's why people are kind of willing to spend the $10 on a
for sure
file. Because do you think this would work on another game that's less popular? I don't think it will.
I don't think so.
I think you've like definitely hit on something, is that they're capitalizing off the success that they've had years ago whenever video games were kind of finding their own identity and becoming something more. And then what happened was video games stopped being a niche market, and then they started to be a mainstream market where capitalists could take advantage and make good money off of it. And then once that happened, it's really totally changed things in good ways and in bad ways. The bad ways, of course, would be things like DLC packages that they give you a $60 game, and then it's not complete. You have to pay for like updates. Even if you pay like, I don't know, $30, I think, for all of the DLCs that come out, I still want a game whenever I pay $60 for it. That's one of the reasons why I love indie games. It's because I feel like these developers, they realize who gamers are, and they still have that love and fire and passion for it. And that's the reason why I want to support the indie community so much, is because all they're trying to do is do what they love, and that's create good video games for people. And they might not look the best, but they usually have fantastic stories, and a lot of times it's hit or miss with gameplay. But yeah, I think that if the big brands keep doing things like this, it's going to give younger burgeoning companies a very good opportunity to seize on their mistakes.
Absolutely. I mean, I have nothing wrong with capitalism in the form of, like, whenever you have competition, it creates demand, which then creates innovation. I have zero problem with anything, and I think that should be encouraged at all costs. However, the biggest difference between indie games and corporate games, like something EA did, like with Star Wars Battlefront 2, whenever you have corporate companies that are doing this kind of thing, what they're doing is trying to increase their profitability by 3%. You have this board of directors that's all sitting around saying, oh, how can we fuck our consumers so that we can get more money? Like, that's generally what you run into whenever you have these giant corporate companies. But the indie game developers, they tend to be like, man, how are we going to pay our light bill for this little tiny ass office that we have?
That's something we can resonate with, right, Matt?
Absolutely. Like, they're just trying to make an income. Like, they're trying to do this. This is their dream. Whereas the people who are on the boards of directors of companies like EA, it's no longer their dream, it's a reality for them. So they're not having to do things as much as they were previously. Whenever you are a company that's worth $1 billion, you can just throw money around, see what works, see what doesn't, and then capitalize on what does. And in general, what does work tends to be mindless throwing money at stuff, because you have whales, like, say, for example, mobile games. You have whales who will spend $30,000 just so they can get, like, the Sword of Truth or some dumb shit like that.
Hey, Mark, what's your experience with loot crates?
Loot crates. Before I get on to that, I think a lot of companies show like compassion towards what they do, and like one company I want to shout out is CD Projekt Red, because whenever you see The Witcher 3, that's just full of passion and love for that game. Not only is the base game over 100 hours long, if you buy their DLC, it's $15 for basically a full game. It's running 20 hours per DLC, and it's totally worth it. But I think it's companies like Star Wars, EA, I mean, with Star Wars Battlefront 2, and it's just shady. You're releasing these loot crates that would otherwise take you over 50 hours to get, an item that would otherwise be free in a lot of these other games. And a lot of it is pay to win, and that's the problem. Cosmetics, I would not have problems paying with cash.
I mean, we do that for skins in League of Legends. I mean,
Yeah,
we're more than willing to do it.
Aesthetics, I think, is totally fine because it doesn't have an impact on the game. But like Star Wars, you're paying for weapons that you should be able to unlock, you know, a few hours into playing it and not, you know, grind out 90 hours.
Yeah, so here's some stats for you. They've changed it, thank gosh, once they got the backlash from the community. But speaking of Star Wars Battlefront 2, and when it came out and they were basically doing the loot crates where they gave out just the general content, like if you want to play as Darth Vader, you have to play about 4,500 hours of gameplay to earn all the base game content, or you could pay $2,100 for that chance. So, like, I mean, I've probably spent a good amount of money on League, getting content that I want, but I don't think I've nearly spent. I don't think I'd play Star Wars Battlefront enough to spend $2,100. I mean, I'm not an oil baron, so my options are kind of limited, you know?
One thing that's been beautiful about this whole transition, though, is that we are seeing governments, we are seeing, like, actual politicians listen to what people are saying for fucking once in our entire lives. Are actually seeing politicians listen to stuff. But they're listening to the gaming community, one of the most underrepresented markets in the country, in the world. We're super unrepresented in terms of, like, getting legislation pushed through that's to our benefit. But they're actually starting to consider loot boxes a form of gambling, and there's places that are actually putting in legislation and trying to pass through legislation that would classify it as gambling. Now, I don't know if I personally would go to the same extent to classify it as gambling, but I do think that there should be some restrictions in at least, you know, that in that market in some degree that makes it so that it's not as predatory, because that's the biggest problem right now, is that it's predatory. It's no longer in good, it's no longer in the good eyes of the consumer. It's become predatory, and that's where the problem really is coming down to.
So I guess with all that said, what do you think the future of DLC and add-on entertainment is going to be, Mark? Like, do you think they're going to continue this trend, or do you think that they're actually hearing the community and maybe changing some of their tactics with just some of the games that you've played recently?
Honestly, I think loot crates are going to stay, whether we like it or not. A lot of companies like games like Overwatch, they take advantage of this, but in a good way, because you can always grind for these loot boxes and they're not very hard to get. But I think it basically speeds up the process, and it's not pay to win. Companies like League of Legends make millions of dollars every year selling skins. Again, mainly cosmetics. It's not going to affect the game, and I think that's how it should be. The only DLC that I think is worth it are, you know, single-player content. And then those are really subjective. I think it depends on the company. Some companies add, you know, more gameplay for your buck than others.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I think I can easily drop $15 on a DLC if it's going to add, like, an element to the game and make me feel like I get my money's worth. Fallout's a really good, before Fallout 4, let me preface that, because I was kind of, I enjoyed Fallout 4, but not as much as I did things like New Vegas. And the DLC that came out for those games was actually really cool. Like, it added a whole nother area of the map to the game, and like a bunch of like side stories and stuff, which I thought helped elevate the game. So, yeah, I think as long as DLCs help elevate the game, they're a good thing. And I'm not mad at loot crates. I actually kind of think it's cool. I just don't like loot crates that have not proprietary, but they have content that should have already came with the base game that you have to get and grind for.